We get asked a lot, what is the best type of radio to use while you're off-roading to communicate with the people that you're on the trail with? And to be honest, there isn't a best option. Each of the types of radio has its strengths and its weaknesses. So I'm going to take a few minutes to go over what my personal preferences are and give you the strengths and the weaknesses of each of the options. I'm also going to list everything that I have and everything that you could possibly use on my website at revereoverland.com/radio. The most common form of radio that's used on the trails is the CB radio. CB radio is great because it is cheap and it is accessible. Anyone can go out and buy a CB radio like mine, which is permanently mounted in the vehicle, for around $30, or they can pick up a handheld one like this for a little bit more. Now, CB radio doesn't require you to have any kind of license, so you can just put it in your vehicle, plug in an antenna, and go. You have a couple options when it comes to the antennas. If you don't want something permanent, you can get the magnetic mounted antenna that sits on your roof, or you can have something more like what I have, which is the permanently mounted Fire Stick antenna that goes on the back of the Jeep. Now, CB is so popular that you often find that it is required in group rides or large events so that you communicate with one another while out on the trails. There are multiple downsides to CB radio, however. Even with a properly tuned setup like mine, you find that the range is not great. In big group rides, you often have people who have to relay messages from the back to the people at the front and vice versa. The quality of the sound isn't great either, so sometimes understanding people can be difficult. Now, I'm sure someone's going to comment on here saying, well, you can boost the strength of the signal, but that's not legal. And that does lead me on to the next problem that I have with CB radio, and that is the interference you get while you're out. Here in Kentucky, you can guarantee it doesn't matter what channel you're on, someone will interfere with your conversation. You'll get someone off in the hills who joins in the conversation uninvited, will start sprouting conspiracy theories over the CB radio, or even just singing to you. It's happened every time I go out. And you don't get that with any other type of radio, only CB, and that's just because it is so unregulated and so available to everyone. Now that brings me on to the next type of radio that we have, and that is the FRS and GMRS radio. If you go out to Walmart and you pick yourself up a cheap set of handheld radios like this, it's probably FRS or GMRS. They both operate on similar frequencies. With FRS, you don't have to have a license, but it is also lower power and less frequencies. With GMRS, you do have to have a license, but it opens up more frequencies and more power. The license for GMRS is $70 and covers your entire family for 10 years, so it is worth picking up. You often don't get interference on these types of radio either because it is something that's licensed. One of the downsides with things like this, the GMRS radio, is that it just isn't very common on the trails, especially not here in Kentucky. Now, it is becoming more popular out west, but still you don't see a lot of people with GMRS. Another issue is if you have the handheld, the range isn't great. Finally, we have my personal favorite, and that's the ham radio. Now, ham radio is a little overwhelming because there are so many options, but you have a huge range of powers, frequencies, bandwidths, and even the radio setups that you can buy. I personally have two ham radios. I have my small handheld here, which is great for when I get out and go spot people, or if I want to go scout ahead. And I have my more permanent setup that's in the Jeep that has a lot more power, where I have the head unit that sits up in the sunglasses holder, and I've wired that down to a small port for the microphone down in the dash, and then the microphone itself sits on a magnetic stele for easy accessibility. Now, to use a ham radio, you must get yourself a license. That includes these handhelds. If anyone tells you that you can use this handheld radio on certain frequencies without getting a license, then they are wrong. As an individual, you must have a license. Unlike GMRS, to get your ham license, you have to take a test. Now, the test is actually a lot easier than you think it is, and that's because they publish all of the test questions and the answers online. What I suggest you do is you take your time to learn some of the rules and the laws regarding using a ham radio, and then take a look through all of the other test questions and the answers. I'll put some links to some websites you can use below in the description. The advantages to ham radio are huge. You get absolutely no one interfering with you, and you have the best quality of sound and the best range. I can talk directly to someone else miles away using the setup that I have in my Jeep. Not only that, but I also get access to repeaters. Now, repeaters take the messages that I send out and then will rebroadcast them over a much greater area. Sometimes those repeaters are even hooked up into networks and they can rebroadcast across the entire state. So when I was in Colorado and Utah and New Mexico, for example, I mapped the repeaters that were going to be along my route, and then if there were an emergency, I'd be able to use those repeaters and the networks to get in contact with other people, even though I didn't have cell service. I'd be interested to hear your opinions. What do you currently use? What's your favorite setup? Or what are you planning on using? Let me know in the comments.